Hello everyone. Welcome to my speed painting. I wanted to record the process of creating my entry for the DVD 4th Anniversary Art Contest. The name of it is Who's Next, and it's inspired by the opening screen, the lobby, a little mix of everything. So, this is a watercolor wash on a primed wood board. I started with yellow and slowly worked my way down to a dark red. I wanted a nice gradated kind of sunset effect. I went fully vertical on the easel with watercolor, which seems like an odd choice, but I wanted it to drip and blend and pull down, as you can see. I did a little bit of splatter as well, break up the light, and then came in with the black acrylic paint, watered down, and started to sketch out where I wanted some of my trees to be. So I stippled in some leaves and some general shapes. I went full out on creating the background for this piece, even though I knew the bottom half was going to be completely redone. Then I started coming back in with the watercolor again to give it a second coat. It really beat it up at first on the white prime board. So adding a second coat saturated the color more and started to layer in color over the trees. I wanted to create depth of light and field and shadow on every layer I could in this. And I knew once I hit the foreground, it was going to be much more naturalistic colors. So when I get to play with bright colors, I'm going to. This is a very, very thick blend of the black watercolor. And I came in to start adding the second layer of trees. If you look in the background real close in the lobby, there's multiple layers of trees in varying shades of gray. Then I came in and did a very light color wash of gray to start putting in that first layer of smoke. Hello there. Future me stepping in here. We had a little oopsie with the DSLR setup over here. Yeah, it just stopped recording about 3 minutes into the third layer of the background. Let me just walk you through what I did. This is the palette as it is now, sorry. I had a black, a white, mixed with the various shades of gray, started color washing in very gently with a wet brush to start creating the smoke. Then I began stippling. The trees were done with a brush. Then the foreground here, I started with the gray, a new gray I mixed up here, layered it in as a color wash, started stippling in different layers of grays with the sponge. Then I went darkest to light, this crimson, this vermilion, this dark orange, this light orange, and this yellow. The reds staying on the outside, the orange coming in, the yellow starting to come into flame with some white as well. Then I blended that with this liquid body tan that I stippled and sponged and eventually brushed in. Then mixed it with the black to start creating a darker texture, and then started drawing these weeds in just to sketch them out and start delineating the foreground from the background. Again, so sorry that we lost so much of that footage. It's actually kind of heartbreaking for me. All right, on to the next part. Thanks, past me. Future me here to continue with the process. So now you get to see that stippling I was talking about. I started going through again. I started with a light tan color, then went to a medium brown, and then a dark brown. If you look closely at your lobby in Dead by Daylight, it's not a grassy area around the fire. It's this very light dirt patch, and I wanted to focus the light where the gap in that tree was. So then I did the same thing. I went light green, then a medium green, then a dark green, and I'm just stippling in layer after layer after layer with just a cut up sponge. I use them all the time in my ceramics work. This is a liquid body black acrylic paint that I started to sketch in the very dark trees in the foreground. I can't help myself. I have to add some branches. I have to add some variation that's just within my style. And I started just bringing it out further and further into the grass, into the roots. And then I began layering in the colors from the ground onto the tree to add a little more depth and contrast. It's a painting, not a moving video game. I wanted there to be a lot more interest, and I wanted to reflect my style. If I get to paint with color, I'm going to paint with color. Then I started sketching in where these patches of the long grass, the wild grass, the weeds, whatever you want to think about it as, in. And this is a wet brush in black acrylic. And I kept coming back and adding in a little more of the black to the trees, and just jumping between the colors to start getting the effect I wanted. I then came back in with the sponge a little bit, cleaned some stuff up. And the fire was the same way, sponge, 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 red, orange, yellow, white. Then I came back after it dried. It took a long time for these layers to dry. The board just repelled the idea of drying. I had to use a different primer from now on. And now I'm sketching in the actual campfire. This is hard. This part was hard for me. I put in the campfire, I put in what I eventually made logs rather than stone benches. And I just wanted the general shape there. I knew where the fire was going to be. I knew where everything was going to be. If I sketch it out, I can make it pretty later. That's how my process works in everything. I wanted to lay out where I wanted my white plus signs to be, and then play with the dancing light effect with the black lines and the red around it. So I sketched in where I wanted the players to be. Then I started adding in more and more colors to the fire. It was going to take a lot. I had to go back and forth between the campfire and the actual fire itself. As you can see, I'm painting right over. Adding in that red, getting a little bit of red detail on the plus signs, then slowly building up. Adding layer, texture with the sponge. Listen, it's an easy way to get a lot of depth. And I'm just going to keep going back and forth here. I'm blending, I'm mixing, I'm adding some more color to the skyline. I'm coming in, I'm adding smoke. I'm wiping paint off, I'm adding paint. I'm adding water with the towel. I'm taking water away with the towel. I'm sketching some of the wood back in. Sometimes you need to let a painting get super ugly before it gets pretty again. I wanted those plus signs to be much more prominent, a much bigger presence, because there was so much going on in the painting and what I chose to include. So I made them bigger. Then I had to come back in and darken those trees up. Do them all over again. I had to come back in, do the grass all over again. It's layer, it's process. And yeah, it's not everywhere I want it to be yet, but it'll get there. Still playing with that fire, still adding more depth, still adding more color. Wiping away, adding color, taking in, taking out. It dried a darker gray, which I knew it would. And now I'm adding all the colors back in from the ground to bring that depth back in. Dry brush it, whereas with a wet brush, winds up really weird looking. Knew it would happen. Added some black in, added some grays in, added some whites in. Put shadow away from the fire, and slowly let it build up again. The colors are going to start to poke through. This is all liquid body acrylic, and I'm going to keep blending until I am happy with it. I added in those white highlights for a purpose in a little bit. I needed some shadow by my benches and my campfire. So I started doing that and smudging it in and erasing and taking it away and adding in more colors and building, adding more shape. And suddenly, with a couple stones underneath, we're starting to get there. I wanted to brighten the white, and I wanted to take away from it and pull the plus signs a little bit further into the effect. So I started scratching in blacks and grays to cut off the edges, make it a little not as clear where they were. And then I went back in with the black acrylic and the red acrylic to add those details. And what you're going to see is I'm starting to add some of my effects paint. So I used a white glitter gel in the center, and I used black again over it. But I also started using a red glitter that I added into the fire and above, as well as this black color shifting paint in gold and black tones. And then I came back in one more time to add fire back to the core of the flame. I added more detail to the trees. They now reflect the flame happening around them. This is what the painting looks like in normal light without catching any of the special effects. And here's the finished piece when you catch it in the light. You can see the gold shifting into the black, the glitter popping out. I love this piece. Stick around on the channel. It's the first video, but I'm going to be adding a lot more art tutorials, a lot of haunted house tutorials, some set painting tutorials, ceramics tutorials, all the stuff I know how to do in that spooky, creepy, cute art world.